Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I'm Eric, the dude who grows food, and today, we're going to talk about garlic. And I'm titling this video, How Not to Plant Garlic, because I'm doing a couple of things that are a little unconventional and probably somewhat frowned upon, and we'll get into that in a moment. But before we do that, take a look behind me. How pretty do freshly made beds look? Compost, wood chip pathways. I've worked on this the last couple of days. This is where the garlic's gonna go. And yes, I know, these first two beds are a little more narrow than these three. I started over in this direction with 3-foot beds, and by the time I made it over here, I realized I was running out of space. That's the beauty of having this whole garden being kind of in the no-dig mentality, is it's all basically just organic matter on top of native soil, regardless of whether or not it was a wood chip pathway or a composted bed. I mean, over the last 4 years, it's all decomposed, so anything, in essence, can be a planting surface. So why is this how not to plant garlic? Well, typically with garlic, you're going to get a bulb. You're going to take that bulb and you're going to break it into cloves, trying to keep as much paper as you can intact so it gives the clove some protection underground. Then you're going to stick it in the ground, pointy side up, flat part down, and over 7 to 8 months, depending on your zone, it's going to grow. Now here's the problem I've got. My garlic bulbs that I harvested back in early June have all shown signs of garlic mite damage. And it happened, I saw this last year as well with my 2024 harvest. I didn't know what it was until about a month before I harvested this year. And that's how I realized it was probably mite damage from last year that I wound up replanting this year. It was too late by that point, so when it came out of the ground, I did the next best thing I could do, which made sure I had good airflow for the curing process, and hopefully that would have worked out. Things looked okay until they didn't, but that put me in the position now where I'm looking at planting and seeing damage on these cloves and wondering what I'm supposed to do. Now you may be asking me, why don't I just rebuy fresh stock? And that is an ideal solution. However, what's not ideal is the fact that I'm planting about 12 pounds of garlic. 12 pounds of garlic, when you're talking about like a hardneck garlic from a high-end purveyor online, is gonna cost you about 30 bucks a pound. You can't even buy it at this point in the year because everybody's sold out. So I'm looking at basically somewhere between $300 to $450 in garlic in that bucket right there. And that's just not something I want to spend the money on right now, if there's a way to sort of fix the problem now for next year's harvest. And that's what tomorrow I'm going to do when I plant this. So what I found online were a variety of solutions. I don't know if any of them are going to work or not, but what I'm going to go with is hydrogen peroxide. I'm going to take a peroxide solution of, I have a 32-ounce bottle. I'll probably take that and mix it with about 4 gallons of water, pour it over that bucket full of cloves, let it sit for about 10 or 15 minutes, stir it around a few times, drain it, rinse it clean, and then I'll probably lay it out flat on maybe some weed cloth just so it can drain through and dry out a bit for the next couple of hours, and then I'll plant it. And that's the best idea I have as far as killing anything that's on the surface of those bulbs. So the two things that, getting back to why I said how not to plant garlic, you want to have clean stock and you probably want to leave as much paper intact. I do not have clean stock, and I peeled every single clove in that bucket. And I did do a count, that's about 640 cloves. My fingers are tired, and they stunk over the last 3 nights as I was working through that process. But in the absence of buying fresh, I want to try this before I do. Now next year, will I go ahead, if it fails again next year, the problem is it doesn't usually show that it failed until 3 months after harvest. That's what I've seen for mine the last couple of years. So by that point, most places are already sold out. So I don't know what I'm going to do, to be honest. And I also don't know if this is a soil issue with me in general, to where even if I bought a fresh 10 pounds of garlic for 300 bucks, if that would actually solve the problem. Because if I have mites in the soil, then they're just going to infect the new stuff. So I'm almost better off just using what I've got, getting 4 to 6 months out of it, and just dealing with the fact that I don't have a full year's worth. So while I've got you here talking garlic, we'll go ahead and talk about why I plant so much. My goal personally is to eat a bulb a day, a whole bulb of garlic a day. I split it between cooked in my breakfast, raw in my lunch, which means I need 365 cloves to go in the ground, and that's just for the ones that I want to eat. I need to plant in excess of that because I need to plant enough to have enough to plant for the following year, and I have to have insurance bulbs against failure, and I have to have extra bulbs for giving away. So in the end, I try to plant somewhere between 600 and 700 cloves every year, and that covers me for every need that I have, except in the case where I have mite damage. So what kind of garlic do I plant? I'm planting hardneck only. So typically, you're going to hear garlic talked about in three primary ways. Three primary types, excuse me. Hardneck, softneck, and elephant. Elephant we're not going to talk about because that is, I think, technically more related to leek than it is to garlic, and I have no experience with it, so I have nothing to share on that one. Softneck is typically planted more in the south, kind of where I am actually, because it doesn't require the same amount of cold stratification to properly separate out into cloves, apparently. Hardneck is typically a little better for the north because they do have the temperatures. Now, I do plant hardneck. Softneck, by reputation, stores a little better than hardneck. You can braid it for storage, which is kind of nice for a storing method. The bulbs might be a shade smaller. You're going to get more cloves that are going to be smaller. And the flavor might be a little more mild. Hardneck, which drew me to this in the first place, was by reputation, variety depending, a bigger bulb, fewer cloves. So when you break open one of those bulbs, you might have 6 cloves of massive size if it's a good size, which is a lot easier to peel, one really massive clove as opposed to 5 tiny cloves to get the same result. I kind of like the idea of that. And by reputation, it was spicier, maybe a little more pungent and flavorful than the softneck. Again, I don't know. I've never planted softneck, but I was kind of going on what I read, and I've been rolling with that ever since. And up until that bad harvest in 2024, things were going great. And if you're curious as to know what mite damage looks like, it's having a hard time focusing, but you see that little dot that's just to the top of my thumb? That is the start of mite damage. Some cloves that I pulled out were entirely desiccated, just falling apart. Some showed significantly more damage than this. This is one that's a pretty heavy spot of damage, but overall the color of the clove is not bad. So we're going to see what happens when that gets hit with the peroxide. So yeah, we'll pick this up again tomorrow when the planting actually takes place. I typically plant in mid-October for a late May, early June harvest. That seems to be covering me well enough. And getting back to stratification. So basically what that concept means is you're going to require a certain cold temperature for a certain number of hours for the clove to undergo its biological process to split at that point when it comes time for maturity. In the absence of that temperature being low enough, what you'll note is that when your bulb comes out of the ground, after fully maturing, your leaves are dying back, it can't grow anymore. You're going to peel everything back and you might see one massive, what I've heard referred to as a pearl. Or you may, if the case is a little better than that, see 2 halves. So the pearl is actually just split in half where you break it apart, and you're going to see 2 big cloves, but they didn't finish the way they're supposed to. So if you planted that going forward, I don't know what the end result would be. It might finish, growing into multiple bulbs at that point. I haven't seen that before, so I don't know. But I actually have planted single cloves before and got double bulbs. So I'm guessing that might be a situation where something didn't stratify through the maturing process the first time around, but something happened the second time and yielded not really double because they're usually smaller at that point, but maybe that's how they finish out. So yeah, we'll pick this up again tomorrow. We'll see how things go. I'll do the process exactly as I said. I'm going to soak for 10 or 15 minutes in hydrogen peroxide solution, dump it, rinse it, lay it out to dry, and then plant it. In these beds, I will probably go with 3 rows, maybe 4 rows for the 3-foot beds, about 6 inches apart on average. I think when I lay this, and what I'll typically do is I'll lay the cloves out ahead of time. where I want them, and then I'll just go back and just plant them about 3 to 4 inches deep. And then I'll probably water them in once, maybe one more follow-up. I don't do much watering in the way of garlic just because I don't feel like introducing a ton of moisture, because my ground does hold a lot of moisture because there are a fair amount of clay particles. So I kind of err on the side of a little less watering in the case of this, just to make sure I don't introduce a rotting issue, especially since I've already taken all the paper off the cloves, and they're probably going to be maybe a little sensitive. So don't want to give them any more stress than they need. So with that, I'll see you tomorrow for the soaking and the planting. So it's the next day. The wind is whipping pretty good here today, so not sure how much talking I'll do because it probably won't make it through the microphone. But we're kind of set up. Let's see. Let's show you what we got. So I laid out that weed cloth because at the end, that's where all of the garlic is going to go to dry. Because the process is going to be, I'm going to take, this is a 3% hydrogen peroxide solution. I'm going to dump this whole container into that bucket. I'm going to fill it probably 2/3 full with water. That's probably going to be about a 4 to almost a 3 to 1 ratio. When I mix it in there together, I'll pour it over top the garlic. I'll stir it around. I'll let it sit for about 10 or 15 minutes, no longer than 15 because I've heard that it can burn that way, and I don't want to kill the garlic. When that's done, I'm going to take my sieve, put it over top this black bucket, dump that into here, and then we'll get a bunch of water to rinse that off. And when that's done, we'll go ahead and put it in a single layer on this weed cloth so that we can get it to dry, let it sit for a couple hours, and then it's going to get planted in those 5 beds over there. So yeah, let's get started. Like I said, how not to plant garlic. But we'll see. Hopefully in the next couple hours this dries out a bit, and then we can go ahead and get it all planted in the beds and call it planted. And then it's just a matter of seeing if it germinates in about 2 weeks or so. 2 or 3 weeks we should see some growth out of these beds when they go in there. And if we don't see it by then, maybe by week 4, and if we don't see it by then they're probably all dead. But time will tell. And we're back. Had lunch, had coffee, and now it's time to get into the actual planting because I think the garlic is dry. So now I gotta decide what I want to lay this stuff out, how many's gonna go in each bed, what the spacing's gonna be. But I'm kind of loose with all of that, so let's just start laying it out and see where it goes. So spacing is going to be about, on these smaller beds, these first 2, I'll run 1 line down the center and then 1 on either side, about 6 inches off center, and 6 inches separating down the way, and that should be plenty of room for each one. And there we go. Bed 1 is all laid out. Now I'm going to do a quick count because I'm curious to know how many I used. It'll give me an idea of how many more I've got to go for the rest of these. Again, I didn't even calculate ahead of time, like dividing X number of cloves by X number of beds for spacing, and said this is what I need. I usually go for 600 to 700 bulbs, cloves for 600 to 700 bulbs. And that does seem to usually work out across 4 to 5 beds. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get a count and see what we're looking at. So that bed has 111 set up for it. The next one over should have about the same, assuming that I'm even close to trying to be accurate. Which means of the 640, that leaves a little over 400, which means the rest of the beds are going to get around 130. So they'll have plenty of space in those 3 beds, or if I wanted to consolidate them into those 2 beds, I could probably get away with doing that. So what I may do is, I may do that. Again, not going to try to do math on the fly. I'll get beds 1 and 2 done, and then I'll just start laying out what I want for beds 3 and 4 and see where that leaves me. And if I have only a few left, I may put them somewhere else, or I may just do a partial bed on bed 5 and use the remainder for something else in the spring. So planting garlic is a pretty straightforward process. You're going to take your clove, basil plate, side down, that's where the roots are going to come out of. Point side up, that's where the shoot's going to come out of. And I'm probably targeting somewhere around 3 to 4 inches in total depth. And lucky for me, your average hoary actually has indicators. So there's my 3-inch mark, my 4-inch mark. And am I really going to be overly scientific about how deep I go with this? Probably not. I'll just stick this thing in the ground, I'll pull it back, and I'll put that thing in, and I'll tell myself that's good enough, and I'll move on. See? That's good enough. I'm moving on. And there we go, folks. It is all laid out, and we almost made it to the end of that bed over there. Got about another 4 by 4 as far as square footage. Yeah, about 4 by 3, 12 square feet left over there. So nothing's gonna go in that area for now. I might put something there in the spring, maybe a broccoli plant, who knows. But anywho, yeah, now it's time to get them into the ground. But before we do that, I want to talk about scenarios. Sort of like the best case, worst case, most likely case of what's going on with this project. Here's the best case scenario. Plant, water, they grow, and when I harvest next year around end of May, early June, they store perfectly to where when I'm pulling them out of storage to go ahead and plant, there is not an ounce of mite damage to be found. That is the best case scenario. Furthermore on that, 4 months even after that, I'm still able to eat off the stock that I have. Again, no mite damage. This is what happened in my my 2023 harvest. I was eating that clean pretty much right until I harvested in 2024. I haven't been able to replicate that the last 2 seasons. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, this treatment process of the hydrogen peroxide and removing all the paper to destroy any mites that are sitting on the surface fails epically, and I get 0 germination. That's the worst case scenario. I don't think that's going to happen. Most likely scenario, what happened the last 2 years happens again this year. I get good germination, the plants grow beautifully, they come out of the ground, for the most part they look clean, but they don't hold up. I'm thinking that's probably actually what's going to happen, and then when that does, I will just have to figure out what my next steps are going to be. But onward and upward for now. Time to plant. And like that, folks, we are planted, and my back is stiff. A couple of parting thoughts before I wrap this one up. One more thing about the hardneck garlic that I like is the fact that you get the scape, S-C-A-P-E, about 3 weeks before the bulb is ready to harvest. That is edible. It is a flower stalk. I don't know if it's 100% exclusive to hardneck, but to the best of my knowledge it is. But it's great because you get an edible crop before you even harvest. So that's really awesome. 2, when it comes to garlic bulb clove size that you're going to plant, I've read a couple different schools of thought on this, so I really don't have strong opinions. I've heard that you should always plant your largest ones so you get large bulbs on the way back out. I've also heard to eat your smallest and your largest and plant your medium-sized ones because they can size up to large, but your large really can't size up beyond, genetically what it's capable to do. So since it can't get any bigger, don't replant it. Again, when I sort my bulbs out for planting, I probably do take some of the bigger, healthier looking ones that I've got when I've got them laid out on the table, because they have the best chance of having at least, medium-sized cloves inside of them, if not large. But I don't know what the science truly says on this. I just know what I've read from a few different sources. So if you're going to plant garlic, I would encourage you to do your own trials. And lastly, anything you heard in this video is, it's just my experience and things I've read. I don't want this to be a tutorial. I mean, heck, I'm titling it How Not to Plant Garlic. So yeah, it probably would behoove you to not use this as a growing guide. But what I will say is everything we're experiencing yesterday and today in this, planting experience, as I go through the coming months and we go through tours and we harvest next year, we're going to see how it worked out. So in hindsight, we can learn a lot, but today I would say, no, don't take anything here as wisdom or knowledge. So with that, we're closing down Garlic Planting 2025. I hope you enjoyed what you saw here today. If you did, please feel free to give the video a like, share it with others if you want. Chatter in the comments below. I'd love to talk garlic. What's your experience been? Have you dealt with garlic mites? And if you did you win? Or, like me, is the jury still out? Yeah, thanks for watching. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.